Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to try to put, being that press is somewhat limited on the floor, we're going to try to make ourselves available on a regular basis until there's greater accessibility. Sorry, I'm a little bit winded. We today have, we're missing one. Yeah, we have Senator Revak joining us. So we have some resources thing to talk about. We wanted to certainly introduce our education chair, Senator Holland. I know he's working on some projects, and you have 3/5 of the Education Committee sitting here as well. Senator Revak is going to talk a little bit about some of the issues that we're facing in resources. And our majority whip is here as well to sort of talk about progress in the Senate. We're proud that we were able to actually get a piece of legislation across the finish line today that is incredibly important in our view, just in case. And to cover that, I'm going to hand it off to Senator Stevens to talk about that a little bit, and then we'll go around the room and take questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. A pretty extraordinary day, I think. We were maybe some of us a little rusty, not having been on the floor for some time, but it was a great experience in democracy. We had it was a concurrent resolution number 1 dealing with our meeting remotely because of COVID. If we have to do it, nobody hopes we have to do it. We all wish that we will never face that, but we needed to have something in place just in case that should happen. So it was a very interesting time on the floor. We had a lot of discussion and a lot of amendments by both the majority and minority members. Passed some, failed others. So basically what we did was to achieve, I think, the maximum flexibility for a sighting in the future should we have to meet remotely. We, again, hope we never use it, but we did have we kept the control of moving quickly in the president and speaker's hands, and this is a similar to a joint resolution or concurrent resolution that we passed last year. I think the important thing is that it does allow us maximum flexibility. It does allow absolute inclusiveness of all members, and it's a tool in the toolbox, just in case we need it. Hopefully we won't, but it's there should we need it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I wanted to touch on some of the issues that you're dealing with right now. We're dealing with in resources as well. Senator Revak, if you don't mind.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. Well, first of all, I'm very honored to be chairing the Resources Committee in the Senate this year. We've seen some administrative orders from our presidential administration that are adversarial to our interests in extracting and developing our resources responsibly here in Alaska. I think at risk in the short term is millions of dollars in investment jobs. And in the long term, it signals less investment from financial institutions to oil and gas development. On top of that, jobs, we've already lost nearly 3,000 oil and gas jobs due to COVID alone. 14,000 jobs in Anchorage, surpassing that of the 1980s. So I think not only the opportunity for job growth is important, but if we were to discard everything in this room that wasn't mined or driven with, driven here with fossil fuels, I think we'd be sitting in an empty room naked. So resources, particularly minerals and our hydrocarbons, are very, very important. And what concerns me about some of these administrative orders is that if we're not producing them here, where we have environmental responsibility and we responsibly develop these resources, we're pushing them to other countries that in many cases are less environmentally friendly. So I think we're going to talk a lot about the history of lands and water in Alaska. We're going to talk a lot about where we're at with resources development and where the federal government is at and trying to stymie some of that. And so I'm real excited for the year to come, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Revac. And our two of our newest members of the team who has impressed me since the day he arrived. I'm thrilled to have you here, our Education Chair, Senator Holland.
Thanks so much. I too am honored to be chairing the Education Committee. Alaska students, parents, and educators are facing so many challenges, and the making best use of our education dollars and struggling performance scores are not the least among them. Now we find ourselves trying to find our way through all the challenges of the COVID issues. Literacy is the big problem for Alaska education. I've heard so many times you have to learn to read before you can read to learn. And I think we have a great team on the Education Committee. I appreciate the patience of some of the more senior members with me. I think I'm learning the ropes. And I look forward to the opportunity to make some progress in resolving some of the issues facing education in Alaska. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Holland. And our Majority Whip, Mia Costello, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I want to just give you a shout out for running floor sessions just in a manner that's so respectful of everybody, and I feel that the Republican majority that's come together was the right thing for Alaska, and we're working with everybody in the room, and so I just want to give you a shout out for that. It's very much appreciated. And also to one of our newest members, you know, I just know that from what I hear from parents and everyone is that we need our kids in school. The sooner that we can get everyone back in school, the better, to be in front of their teachers where they're supposed to be. And so, although I don't sit on the Senate Education Committee this session, I think we're all in good hands, Senator Holland, with you there. I just wanted to say that we are up and running. There's a lot of confidence despite the challenges that we face here in the building, and all of our committees have either met or will be meeting next week, hearing bills, getting important testimony done. So with that, I just wanted to say we appreciate the media making an opportunity, you know, for us to answer your questions. So thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to questions, I wanted to thank Senator Stevens for his bill, but I also actually wanted to thank the entire Senate. That was a great session. There were, so we wanted to get this cross finish line just in case, right? We don't know what happens with the pandemic, but we wanted to be able to do the people's business if things turn the wrong way, and we certainly don't expect them to. But we moved quickly, and we had a great discussion on the floor. The minority brought us a couple of good ideas. We had our own members that were uncomfortable with a couple of things that we agreed that they needed a little bit more research. And I think you heard the discussion on the call. Our concern was a technological interruption where we had some critical business in place. We were trying to find a way to do that without interfering with the rights of, we want legislators to represent their constituents. We want them to vote on every issue that's on the floor. So we tried to kind of thread that needle so that we wouldn't have an interruption, and members were uncomfortable, and I think it was a great discussion, and we decided to, the maker of that amendment decided because of that they were going to pull it. But I liked how it flowed. I liked our ability to have that discussion. I liked the ability that we worked together with the minority on something that's not a partisan issue. Being able to move forward collectively is not a partisan issue. And I hope that that's the spirit we see all year long. I was actually very impressed with the way that went. Before I go into questions, one more thing. I wanted to make recognize a couple of members that have been out there on some issues that are important to many Alaskans. One is Senate Bill 39 with Senator Schauer, election integrity. I want to clarify that, which I'm fascinated by some of the emails that I'm receiving. It's important to people on both sides of the issue, but I want to clarify that Senator Shower is in no risk of having his chair removed because he decided to bring an idea forward. We want a free-flowing Senate. We're not going to muzzle our members. We want those things to be considered. And there are some things from both sides of the aisle, some legitimate issues that people want us to discuss. We're going to discuss them openly. And that's largely also the issue with Senator Reinbold, who's evaluating how to maintain the authority of the legislative branch. We have seen some creep from the judiciary and executive branches, and I think it's a worthwhile effort on her part to try to evaluate how we maintain our proper authority without that creep. So those are good discussions. They have different styles than some of us, but that's part of the beauty of this caucus of equals. I think we all have our strengths that we bring to the table, and we're going to let things flow respectfully and see what kind of results we can deliver as a team. So let's go to questions. Becky.
Becky Moore with the Associated Press. I'm wondering if you feel that there's more that needs to be done or different kinds of questions that need to be asked as part of the vetting process for individuals that you'll be confirming, particularly in light of the allegations that were raised against the last Attorney General.
Well, I think that's a very good question. I would have to say that I certainly have faith in our committee chairs. I think as a caucus, we need to get together and talk about some a perhaps more comprehensive formal evaluation before they get into the committee structure. Some questions that we might all like to see. So remember that, say that, I don't know what position you might be asking about, but say the AG goes to judiciary. As a caucus, I think what we should do is get together and talk about, so there's only to be those members of judiciary asking the questions, but as a caucus, I think we should ask about the kinds of things we'd like to see covered by that committee. So I think that's something we generally do, but I think recent occurrences have perhaps placed more of an emphasis on digging a little deeper on some of those questions. So I'll be looking forward to collecting questions and working with the judiciary chair in that case, the other chairs in the other cases, to make sure that we're properly vetting confirmation or confirmees. Jeff.
Jeff Lanfield. I was earlier you talked about the free flow of ideas and not muzzling members. Yesterday, Senator Reinbold and the State Affairs Committee suggested calling judges before legislative committees to answer for how they ruled on a case. Judge Crosby in this case, and she's the chair of the Judiciary Committee. Can you comment on the concept of the legislature calling the judicial branch in front of them to answer for court rulings they've made?
I guess what I would say is I would have to watch, I did not watch the interaction in that particular case. I don't know what the context of that question was, but just like we're going to be defending our branch against creep from the other branches, I think we should be expected to be the same. So I don't have an answer until I review the tape, if you will. But that would be an interesting request. So we're going to stay in our branch. We want them to stay in theirs, but I'll have to review that particular discussion. Andrew.
Andrew Kitchenman, Alaska Public Media, and KTOO. The governor's disaster declaration is expiring on February 14th. Senate Health and Social Services has Senate Bill 56 in front of the committee. Is it important that this bill or an extension of the powers that are in the disaster declaration be passed by then? And do you have any thoughts on the fact that the other chamber isn't organized?
Senator Costello.
Thank you for the question. That bill's before the Health and Social Service Committee, as you mentioned. So far, I do not believe that a claim has been justified for extending it. The governor is asking that it be extended until September 30th, 2021. If that were to pass as written, Alaska would be the only state in the nation that would extend it to that period, which apparently matches up with the federal budget cycle. Alaska has received large amounts of federal funding through the years, and we've never had to match up our budget cycles with the federal government in order to receive funding. There are other portions of the bill that are actually in other legislation. For example, Senator Wilson has a bill that I'm going to hear in Senate Labor and Commerce next Wednesday, which has which addresses things that really are separate from a disaster declaration. I think Alaskans want the disaster declaration to end. I speak for myself in that I do not see a compelling reason to extend it. However, having said that, I do know that the commissioner has not yet shared the impact to the vaccines. I think the vaccine distribution should be voluntary, and people who want a vaccine should be allowed to get one, but I do not believe that it should be mandated. And if it is true that our procurement process takes 3 months to process a procurement, I think that the problem then is that we should speed that process up, you know, for Alaskans. The bill is still in committee. It has not been fully introduced yet. It has 2 additional committees of referral. So if you were to juxtapose what happens in an initiative process where you walk into a store and you're asked your opinion at the door with very little information, the legislative process is exhaustive and it's thorough. And so we're hearing that bill in the committee. I do not know if it will move out of committee, but the next committee is Senate Labor and Commerce. When I talk to my constituents, and I just talked to one today, her name is Liz, she's very frustrated at the extension of a disaster declaration into September. And so anyway, I do not speak for the entire caucus in this matter. Again, it hasn't come before the legislature for a full vote. And so I will be looking forward to hearing more about the need to extend a disaster declaration into September of this year. I think the focus should be keeping Alaskans healthy, keeping Alaskans safe, getting our kids back into schools where they can see their teachers face to face, getting our businesses open, supporting Alaskans. If there's federal funding that can be distributed, I'm fully in support of that, and I probably believe all the members are. Do I believe that you have to have a declared disaster to receive the funds? At this point, I'm not sure the case has been made for that, but I don't speak for, you know, for the governor's office or for the caucus right now. I'm just really speaking for my constituents.
Other questions? I actually just want to touch on one thing on that, and I was what I'm hoping the administration clarifies is that the state process has nothing to do with closed businesses and closed schools, and I think it's a great opportunity for people to understand the difference between what the state government has done versus the Title 29 health powers that we have no influence over. So I'm hoping that discussion is very active as well, because I do hear from Alaskans that are very confused on that, who does what and why some of their lives are so adversely affected. So I'm looking forward to, I sat in the other day and I'm looking forward to that discussion developing. Sean?
Sean McGuire, Alaska's news source. Just following up on the disaster declaration, in November when it was going to expire, healthcare professionals from across the state were highly concerned that it would expire because it allows them to triage patients outside hospitals. It allows them to conduct telehealth in ways that they say has been essential to treating COVID-19. does the caucus support allowing those provisions to expire come February 14th?
Senator Costello?
Thank you. And if you tuned into the committee hearing, you would have learned that the telemedicine provisions can be handled separately. They really are not tied to the disaster declaration. It basically allows the Commissioner of Health and Social Services to essentially not follow any state law or statute related to telemedicine. When we supported the telemedicine legislation, it was with the understanding that this would improve access to healthcare for Alaskans. So obviously the legislature has spoken on our support for improving access to telemedicine and access to healthcare for Alaskans. So I do not believe that that's a problematic portion, but when you look at the bill, the section on nonprofits, the section on telemedicine, the section on procurement, a lot of these issues seem to have just been thrown into a bill to get it through the process quickly. It does have an effective date that's retroactive, so if the House, somebody had asked about the House organizing, the bill is retroactive to February 14th, but I can tell you that I'm not comfortable extending a declaration that far into the future, and based on the questions and comments in committee, and there will be public testimony on this. I mean, we will hear from Alaskans. Do we really want to have a declared emergency well into the fall? I would say the answer is no, but I do think there are other options. So anyway, that's where that stands with that bill.
James?
For Senator Revak, this week the governor announced some ideas for a gas pipeline from the North Slope to Fairbanks. What odds would you give that that pipeline actually happens?
Well, thanks, James. Given its history, we're going to have a robust conversation about where we're at and what the numbers look like, and we're going to be doing that in the Resources Committee in the weeks and months to come. So I couldn't really give it a number. I think we need to take a look at the specifics of it in committee to find out what whether it looks promising or not.
Understanding you can't give a precise number, would you say it's greater or lesser than 50/50?
I'm not going to say, James, that we're going to explore that in committee, and I think we'll wait until then and make sure we have all our ducks in a row before we get out ahead of that.
Online I have Alex Bengal from KTVF in Fairbanks. Alex?
Thank you, and thank you for holding this availability. I was wondering if anybody in the room had a comment on Senator Kawasaki's legislation, Senate Bill 6, which incentivizes early retirement for public employees.
Comments? Senator Stevens?
Well, I have not read the bill, I have to say, but my experience as president of a school board was that we did early retirement, and it was a disaster. It did not save us any money. It lost the best teachers and hired the least experienced teachers. So I'm a little cautious about that early retirement bill. As I said, I will look at it very closely, but it's got to accomplish what it intended to accomplish, which is to save funds and to employ younger people. It may not be successful.
Sean, I'm sorry. Jeff was actually first. Jeff?
Mine just real quick, Jeff Landfield. My understanding is the presiding officer has the ability to open up the other gallery, and since no one's used the other gallery and there's some logjam in the hallways and the senators are also in close proximity, is it possible to open up the other gallery for media?
The way that I read the Legislative Council, there are some changes we'd like to make. We would like to give greater access to the press. The way I read the Legislative Council document is that the other side has to be organized, and changes would be between the two presiding officers. So there are some things that we definitely want to do, but we're going to follow the rules. And the guy who helped pass those rules is sitting right next to me. So I will point at him anytime there's a difficulty associated with our COVID restrictions, or protection, I should say. Senator Stevens?
I've got to say, I came to the building Monday and had to have the test. It took me an hour to get through that line over there. And my question was, who came up with this idea? So, but, you know, the goal of Ledge Council, last Ledge Council, which no longer exists, was to make this facility, this building, as safe as possible. And I think we've done that. We were very, very conservative about how we did it. The concern was the number of people on the floor of the Senate and the House. I think we've done as good a job as we could there to reduce the number of people there. I know there was objection by the media, and of course you are very important to us. You are conduit to the public, so they know what we're doing. So it's really important that you be here and in this building. But the decision was made after much consternation to only allow one media person on the floor at a time, and to have that person chosen by yourselves, by the media. The President is right that many of those decisions can only be changed by a legislative council. You have to understand there are lots of rules that legislative councils have made over the years. They never stop. They continue on until the next legislative council changes them. So, as the President said, we are waiting for the House to organize and then name a chairman of the Legislative Council. They will chair it this year. So, again, I apologize if it seems difficult, and I know it is, but the goal is to have as few people as possible on that floor to make sure that everyone is as protected as possible.
Thank you. So to clarify some of the rules, our legislative council changes, some are presiding officer changes. But they do have to be organized before we can make those changes.
I thought the chambers was,
Oh.
I thought the chambers specifically was up to the presiding officer.
Once they are organized, once the other side is organized, we can make those changes. The way that I read, if you look at the very last line of the legislative council rules, that's what it says. Sean?
Turning again to the disaster declaration, the governor has said the vaccine is voluntary. The disaster declaration doesn't have anything to do with schools. That's left to school districts, and there seemingly is no restrictions on businesses. Some of the issues you brought up, Senator Costello, is that more an issue with misunderstanding or misinformation among the public rather than actually what's in the bill itself?
Thank you for the question. So you're right that the closing of schools, for example, in Anchorage, is a local decision. But what happens in this building and the state legislature sends a message. And so the message that would be sent to extend it to that degree, I think, is something that needs to definitely be looked at.
So I wanted to dovetail on that. I actually agree that the September 30th date is problematic. And what we're doing right now, and what the caucus has asked the committees to do, is evaluate, do we need an extension? What could be outside of an extension? We want to operate with facts. We understand that there's no mandated vaccine. We understand of the local impacts that, what will be interesting is if we decide to move away from a disaster declaration, it does not change the fact that Anchorage and other health power communities can do the same thing they're doing right now. We have not initiated those mandates. But what's most important, and that's what the committees are doing, and Majority Whip is on that committee, is evaluating actually is there something that must be in a disaster declaration, and will that drive us to support an extension? And I think that's the key issue right now. Mm-hmm. So thank you all. We have another committee meeting here right now. We appreciate you being here. Look forward to next week. And of course, you can always reach us if you need to talk to us individually.